There is this view that people who do not advocate for low interest rates, they also don't advocate for full employment, for the recovery from the weakest in society. Just this idea that you need to stay down here to allow things to burn hot, to have a more inclusive recovery. You push back against that. Can you walk us through it and why it's dangerous to maintain this belief that you have to advocate for zero interest rates to be able to advocate for full employment?
Yeah, John, I think what people don't realize is that the environment matters. So if as we were in the past, in a globally disinflationary environment, which we were, then you could stay loose for longer and try to raise everybody's living standards. And that made sense. And I was actually supportive of that. What doesn't work is when you have a global inflationary environment and you try to do that, because ultimately what you're going to do is hit the most disadvantaged segments of the populations in two ways. First, by inflation. And there are studies now that show, I think beyond any doubt, that inflation hits the poor the most. And we hear it already with what's happening to food price, to gas prices. And then secondly, after they've been hit by inflation in a bigger way, they get hit by declining economic activity and losing jobs or losing wages. So you don't want that to happen. You don't want to hit them twice. And that's what I'm afraid is a high risk right now.
So help me understand then, and help our audience understand, Mohamed, if they start to hike interest rates, if they start to reduce the balance sheet, how that helps. What does that achieve?
So it achieves a sustainable path. You know, there's an old phrase that macro stability isn't everything, but without macro stability, you have very little. So macro stability is a necessary condition. And I've always said that the policy response should constitute, first, the Fed going faster in taking its foot off the accelerator, so doing taper faster and a bit of QT and maybe rate hikes. Second, we need to do more on the fiscal side to increase labor force participation, to increase productivity. And then third, we need to be more serious about understanding and supervising probably the non-bank financial sector. That's the elements of a package. It is feasible. It just needs implementation will.
Let's set up the following segment, just with a little tease. Work with me here, Mohamed. We've talked a lot about the economy, a lot about your prescription for this Federal Reserve. You've nailed the call on the economy this year, particularly on inflation for 2021. Mohamed, has that been helpful as it informs your market calls as well? Because what I've struggled with is when I look at even the most accurate forecaster in this economy right now, it would not have helped me predict where 10-year yields are ending the year. So help me work through this, your understanding of the economy and how it informs your view of what's been developing in financial markets too.
So it's been a massive decoupling because the economy hasn't really mattered for financial markets. What has really mattered for financial market is liquidity injection. And if you can bet on the liquidity wave continuing, which was the correct bet, you get the everything rally. So, you know, this year, last year, the year before has been all about liquidity. It didn't really matter what the economy does. It didn't really matter what credit risk does. As long as you got the liquidity call right, you made money. And I have said over and over again, you ride the liquidity wave for now. You have to be tactical. I never guessed, John, tactical would last so long. Tactical has been a really, really long time. But there will come a time when you'll have to pivot from the liquidity issues to the more fundamental issues. And I think that will be 2022.
Let's talk about 22. You wrote this morning in a Bloomberg Opinion column, there is an underappreciation of the current inflation dynamics, from the ability of Democrats to retain control of Congress to the damaged credibility of the Federal Reserve. The 2021 inflation surprise will reverberate throughout 22. We're going to talk about this a little bit more in the following segment, Mohamed, but how do you think this is going to reverberate through financial markets in a way that it did not this year?
So your introduction to your show was great because people said, who would have guessed that you would have inflation at 6.8%, you'd have the 10-year at around 150, and you would have 70 record highs on the S&P, including yesterday. That's the dilemma is, will this trifecta last into 2022?